If you're crazy about birds like I am, come join me next on Painting with Wilson Bickford and I'll show you how to paint this beautiful red cardinal.
This program is made possible in part with funds from the Decentralization Program, a re-grant program of the New York State Council on the Arts, with the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature, and administered by the St. Lawrence County Arts Council.
Hi, welcome to Painting with Wilson Bickford. I have a fantastic bird painting to show you today. Those of you who know me know that I love to paint birds. They're one of my all-time favorite subjects. I know I have a lot of favorite subjects, but birds are probably one of the most favorite of mine. Here are just some examples of ones I've done in the past. Rose-breasted grosbeak. I get these guys at my feeders quite a bit. I love doing chickadees, as most of you know. I have some YouTube lessons with chickadees. I can remember in 3rd grade I would go to the library and I would take out the Audubon books of all the paintings that James John Audubon did. Downy woodpecker. I was fascinated with birds in general, and just more fascinated by looking at those books that somebody actually painted them with such expertise. So they've always been something I've been interested in. Today we're going to focus on a red cardinal. I'll show you what I've done to get prepared for this. I actually drew a sketch out on paper. From there I took graphite transfer paper. I laid it down, I laid the sketch on top. I traced the design on with a red pen because the red pen tends to show up on the darker ink lines so you know where you've been, so you're not redoing the same lines over and over. You can track your progress. And from there I took some masking tape, ripped off a couple strips, and I simply taped over the bird, overlapping the strips just enough so you don't get any bleed through. And then I took a sharp utility knife and I trimmed away everything that's not bird. I just cut around on the line. It won't take much to cut through just the tape and not cut into your board. Use a brand new extra sharp blade. Don't use an old dull blade. And the tape is very thin, so it doesn't take much to cut through. This is just your typical everyday run-of-the-mill masking tape from the hardware store. It's nothing fancy. Everybody always asks me about my tape like it's something special. It's not. It's just masking tape. So the bird is all protected and blocked out, so it makes it pretty easy to come in and just drop the background in around him. Watercolorists have the advantage of using masking fluid, and they can block areas out of their painting with that on the paper. It's a liquid latex they apply with a brush. We oil painters don't have any such thing as that, so I like to use tape. So this makes it a little bit easier to work. I don't have to paint around the bird. I can go right over him and then peel that off when the time comes. Okay, so I'm going to take some of my fast flow white base medium. I'm going to apply a nice thin coat to the whole canvas, which will make it very slick and blendable, and I can get these nice soft subtle edges in my sky in the background. I'm going to take my 2-inch brush, a little bit of this medium, and I'm going to scrub in a nice thin even coat. Now because you're putting white paint on a white background, sometimes it's hard to see where you're putting it, so you'll have to look at it in the glare of the light, get the shine. I can see it here in the studio lighting, but sometimes you have to take your canvas right off the easel and tilt it back so you can see the shine on it. It'll be a little bit shiny and slick where it's wet and dull where it's dry, so that way you can track your progress pretty easily. But it won't take much of this stuff. Notice I'm putting it on quite sparingly. A little bit will go a long ways. This will make it easy to blend and get nice, soft, muted, blurry edges in this background, which is going to bring all of our main focus to the bird in the branch. Okay, from there I'm going to put in some background sky. This is going to go in quite simply. I'm going to take a little bit of the ultramarine blue, work it evenly into the brush so there's no chunks or streaks left in it. Strive for a uniform color. And you'll notice I'm going to leave it kind of blotchy and open. If I just paint it solid blue, it's going to look flat like a wall. So I want to roll and twist the brush, leave some lighter areas. They might not stay pure white. They don't have to. I could go put pure white fluffy clouds in there if I choose to. But this is a simple way to paint a nice, effective background sky. It'll look like we're looking up at the bird and he's got this blue sky backdrop behind him. And see, I can freely paint right over the bird area because I have him taped out. That's painting smart, not painting hard. I'm going to need just a little more paint. The same blue, so I'll just mix a little bit of that up on the fly. I'm going to darken the corners of the canvas in particular because it kind of helps frame it in. But leave it open a little bit, don't block it in so it's just solid flat blue. Notice how this looks like it's got some life to it, and you got some lights and darks and some clouds wafting through in the background. To blend that, I'm simply going to take a paper towel and wipe the brush off. I really don't need to wash it. I'm not much of a brush washer. A lot of times I can just wipe the brush and keep right on rolling. So notice I lay the brush flush to the canvas and I just do like an oval. And all these little hard areas and brush marks, it kind of fine tunes those and takes those out, which leaves it nice and soft and kind of blurry, which pushes it into the distance. This isn't a painting about a sky, it's a painting about a bird. So I want to downplay the sky and save all my emphasis for the bird. Okay, that's pretty effective, don't you think? That looks pretty good. Looks like a background sky to me. I'll set that brush to the side. I'm going to take my number 10 flat brush. I'm going to start putting in this branch that's in behind the bird. Notice that that's kind of softer and more vague than the one up close. Again, I'm letting that be in the distance and I'm going to bring everything else a little closer and more defined. So with this brush, I'm going to take some titanium white, a little bit of Van Dyke brown. I want a little bit lighter value than what this branch in the foreground is going to be later on. So I'm kind of thinking of that as I'm mixing this value. Value is very important in paintings. It just simply means how light or dark a color is, but it has everything to do with the outcome of your painting. Anything in the distance should be a little bit lighter value. So I'm going to thread this branch in through behind him back here somewhere. Now I could use a liner brush for this, but this flat brush comes to a really nice chisel and makes it easy. You just got to control the pressure on it. Don't press down too hard. And I'm going to put this central branch right through that area and put some of the needles on that. Now this one is pretty basic. I'm going to put a little more in on this one. I'll put another offshoot maybe like this. And another one maybe coming off here. So it Y's off a little bit. From there, I'm going to take my fan brush. This is number 3 fan brush. I got a little brush bristle on there. I'll scrape off there. Number 3 fan brush. I'm going to put in some of this background needle texture. I need some green for that, so I'm going to use sap green. A little bit of the Van Dyke brown to dull it. A little bit of white. Get a green that you like. Personally, I like a blue green rather than just a green green. I'm going to put a little bit of blue in that. So as simple as that is, there's a lot of colors in that. I've got white, green, blue, and brown. But I'm just trying to achieve a flavor that I like. The value is important too. I'm not getting too dark with it. I want it to look a little lighter and a little more muted. Now I'm going to try this. It looks pretty good on my palette. Against this blue, it might read differently. So I'm going to check it and see what I've got. Actually, that's not too bad. I think I can live with that. And see, if I just tap the paint into the bristles like this, I'm not using a lot of paint. Don't need much. Keep your bristles nice and open, and then just kind of pull lightly with the tips. It's really nice for giving you that needly texture. And I'm going to kind of hit and miss with this a little bit. Don't be afraid to leave a few little spots of bare branch hanging out here and there. Notice as the branch is going this way, the needles tend to go towards that end where it terminates. Don't pull them back the other way and go against the grain. They don't typically do that as a general rule. And like I said, there's not much to this. Right here, it doesn't look like much, but I don't want a lot. This is going to be downplayed compared to everything else. I find my students tend to sometimes try to put too much detail in their backgrounds. You always have to downplay the backgrounds to make your subject in your foreground take center stage. And see, because I have the bird taped out, I can paint right over him just like he's not even there, which is so much easier than trying to paint around him at this point. That's why I tape him out. Okay, that's pretty much it for the background, for that part of it anyway. So I think we're ready to move on to the bird. I'm going to take my painting knife, and I'm going to dig under this tape and remove it. There should be a bird under here. All right. Now it's just a matter of filling in that shape. I will start by just blocking in the whole bird with red. What I find is easier for this, a lot of times when you're oil painting or acrylic painting, you're starting with your darker value and building up to your lighter one. In this instance, usually when I do something like this, I find it's easier to start with the mid-tone and then balance it out on either side with your dark value and your highlighted value. So I'm just going to come in and just paint him in with a red to start out. And then I'm going to start adding the darker shaded red and the more lighter highlighted red. It just makes it easier. So I'm going to use my number 6 round brush. It's pretty handy for this. So I'm going to start with some of the cadmium red deep. And I can add a drop of thinner. I've got some mineral spirits here in a bucket I can use to thin this down a little bit. And I'm going to try this. I might need to mute this back a little bit. Maybe just a tad. It looks pretty strong to me. I'm going to put just a touch of the Van Dyke Brown, and you'll see that it kind of knocks it back a little bit, not quite as red. So from here, I just need to base in all the red. And I'm not going to put it on real heavy. I'm not going to worry about that little comb on the back of his head, those little spikes. I will come back and define those with the liner brush later. Now this is going to take a couple minutes. So I'm just going to scrub in all of the parts of him that are red. So I'll go off camera here for just a second because this is going to be kind of tedious, and we'll be right back with you. When painting birds, it's important to get the nice feathery texture that they're noted for. I don't have any paint on this. I'm just demonstrating to show you the stroke, but with a little bit of paint. Now this is a dry painting, a finished painting. You want to just pull out those little tufts along the perimeter. It makes a total difference in the quality of your artwork. Okay, that finishes up that. I just went off camera because that was going to be a few minutes. So it was going to be very tedious for you. So I just blocked that in with a middle grade or middle tone red. I'm going to balance that out with some darks and some lights, which will give his body some roundness and form. So before I get too far on this, let me take my liner, and I'll do that little comb on the back of his head too while I'm at it. That round brush was a little bit much for that. So I'm going to thin this down and roll this. And this is where I get the little sharp edges on that crest on the back of his head. That helps to hold your breath a little bit as you do this because it's a light little touch right there. Okay, want him to look a little spiky back there. Okay, now before I get too far on that, I'm going to come in and develop his mask and his beak and all the rest of that. I'll probably do the beak first. They have kind of an orange peachy colored beak as a general rule, although sometimes I've seen them where they're a little more reddish and pinkish. I'm going to use the liner brush. I'm going to take some of the Fast Flow White Medium here off my palette with Cadmium Yellow Pale, a little bit of the Cad Red Deep, and I'm going to roll this to a point. It's kind of a flesh tone, peachy flesh tone at this point. I'm going to basically paint in the whole beak, top, bottom, both halves, upper and lower, and then we will add shading and highlight that to give it form. Right now it's going to look very flat, but you'll see as I develop it, it will take on shape and look like it's supposed to. Okay, from there I'm going to put shading on the bottoms of both halves, the upper and lower half. You'll notice that it's a little bit darker underneath right on the very bottom. It's also a little darker on the bottom of the upper half of the beak. And then likewise, it's light on the tops of both of those sections because they're actually rounded. They round off from light to shadow. So into that peach color, I'm going to add a little bit of the Van Dyke Brown and darken that down a little bit. And I'll put that underneath down here and just blend it into the peach so it doesn't leave a real discernible edge. And on the bottom half of the upper beak, which is actually just above the division between the upper and lower beak, I'll put a little bit of that darker value here. See how it's starting to make it look a little more three-dimensional, and then I still need to put a highlight on it. I wiped the brush off on a rag laying right here. I'm going to go just a little bit darker than that. I wiped the brush off to blend it. I'm going to go a little darker just to make sure you can see that a little easier. I'm not trying to crowd out the peach color. I'm just accenting it and giving it a shaded section. Something about like that. Okay, I'm going to swish the brush off in the thinner. I'm going to take some of this Fast Flow white base coat and roll some of that into the brush. And he needs a nice little bright highlight on the top right here. Their beaks are very hard and shiny. I don't know what they're made of, if it's some sort of cartilage, but they're a hard, shiny surface, so they tend to cast a nice, strong, bright highlight. And right on the upper side of the lower half of the beak, if that makes sense. See how that makes it look rounded and three-dimensional? If it's a little harsh, you can wash your brush off and come back and just blend it ever so lightly. There we go, that looks pretty good. The next part is his eye. I'm going to paint the eye in with Van Dyke Brown, very dark, and then I'm going to paint the black mask. And you'll notice there's just a little sliver of white around that eye that separates that dark eye from the dark feathers. So I'm going to leave a little strip of canvas showing there if I can. It's tight work, so I'm just going to paint the eye with Van Dyke Brown like this. Notice I'm leaning one hand on another. It's this steady, touchy work here, tight detail. I swished the brush out and I'm going to take black, and now I'm going to paint the mask. And be careful how you encroach in around his beak and whatnot, because you don't want to cut that off bluntly. They have a certain shape there, and I had it in the sketch, so I want to maintain that shape. Do yourself a favor and get your paint thin enough. See, when you touch it on here, it should easily fall off your brush. If it doesn't, you're making it harder than it needs to be. And see, I'm just going to paint this in. I'm going to overlap the red a little bit. Some of them are red feathers, some are black, but you don't want them to meet like this. You want them to meet like this. So they're kind of serrated into each other. And around his eye, I'm going to leave a white ring. Now I've got to start bigger than what it actually is and then encroach into it. It's going to be very small, but just enough to kind of help separate that eye from the rest of those black feathers. See how it creates that little bit of a separation? The touchiest part of this bird is his face, his eye and this mask and the beak. You got to get those right. So I have to slow down here and take my time with this a little bit. If you're painting at home, you'll have all the time in the world. So I'm just showing you the techniques of how to do it. All right, that's looking pretty good. I'm swishing that brush out again in my cleaner over here. And I'm going to take just a little dot of some of this white base coat on the end of this brush. And on his eye at about 2 o'clock, I'm going to put the smallest little dot of a spark in his eye, which will kind of bring him to life. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good so far. There. It's touchy work. But like I said, if you take your time, it's not a race, take your time with it, you'll get it. Okay. Now I need to start adding some darker accents and some lighter ones. I'm going to switch over to my number 2 detail script liner. It's a bigger brush than the liner. The actual liner is smaller and skinnier. This one, the detail liner, is bigger and fluffier. It'll still roll to a point, but it holds a lot more paint. And in certain applications, that's an asset. This is pretty handy. So I'm going to take this brush with red and a little more brown this time, darken it down a little more than I did previously. And I'm going to accent the back of his head, down this back of his wing, through the middle of his tail. We have the light coming from the right, so I'm basically just accenting the left-hand sides of most of his body. Now the brown is a lot stronger than the red, so you won't need much of that brown to tone this red down, but I'm going to make it like a dark maroon color. And I've rolled this brush to a point. And I'm going to start with this little comb on the back of his head and darken this down and pull inward. I find it much easier to pull this way. A lot of people tend to pull it out this way, but there's a tendency to pull too far and all of a sudden the back of his head is way, way out of proportion and too big. So I start right here and pull my way in. I think that's easier, at least for me. But you might want to try it either way and see what works best for you. Painting is one of those things that everybody does differently, so you have to find the way that's going to work for you. I'm going to go just a tad darker with that. Just want to make sure that that value is showing up for you. I'm going to find his wing. Now I had the line on there with the original sketch, but obviously I've painted over it, but I still know where it is. And if not, I'll refer to the sketch to find it. But I know it's somewhere right about here. The wing will be a little darker. Now it looks pretty dark, but I'm going to mix it into that red that's already on there, so it'll lighten back somewhat. And notice I'm dragging it in the direction of the feathers. I'm not going across the grain. Because some of these brush strokes will show in the end. And it will kind of be conducive to describing the shape and the direction of the wing. Now I'm going to come back and blend these and soften them into that mid-tone here momentarily. I'm getting all the color on here first. I'm going to put some of this dark right through the middle of the tail. Like that. And then I'll wipe the brush off. And I'm going to hold it flat. I'm just going to pat. Rather than go in and stir it like this, it works much easier just to pat it like this. And soften that transition from the dark shadowed part of the back of his head towards the front. We still need to come back and put the highlights on the front. Now this leading edge of his wing will stay dark or in a harder edge, so I'm not going to blend that necessarily, but I'm going to blend it where it comes into his shoulder. And see, I'm just patting a little bit. And it's just enough to kind of soften everything in a little bit. See, even just by adding that dark, he's starting to take on more shape. And same thing here. I'm going to soften this down through on either side through the middle of the tail a little bit. All right. There, it's starting to look pretty good. I'm going to come back and start adding some highlights on him here in just a second. I'm going to take some black. I want to get a little more feathery around the black where it borders his red areas. Okay, we're nearing the end of this particular episode, so come on back next time and we'll finish this guy up. And we'll start adding some highlights and the foreground branch. See you then.
This program is made possible in part with funds from the Decentralization Program, a re-grant program of the New York State Council on the Arts, with the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature, and administered by the St. Lawrence County Arts Council.
Available exclusively through public television, Wilson Bickford's Landscape Techniques DVD gives you an in-depth lesson on a variety of techniques used in painting skies, trees, water, and grasses. Order your DVD copy now for $15 plus shipping and handling. And all 13 episodes of Painting with Wilson Bickford Series 100, as seen on public television stations, now available on DVD in one box set for $35 plus shipping and handling. To order, call 1-800-869-2665.